Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. Today's daf is daf Tzadik Daled and Baba Kama. As we learn Prachemical basis on so much of a Shiur about the 8th, 9th line down on the page. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Mai. What are we discussing? Yesterday we started the new parak, in which we discussed the main idea here is shinui. When you steal something, Pasuk says when it comes to gzeila, not geneva, not a burglary where you have to pay double, just a regular steal. You stole it, you held him up, you took it from him, whatever, but you did it in a robber kind of a form, either openly or whatever, but you have to return the item. It says that you stole. However, the Mishnah had said that if it's already not the same item anymore, you stole some plain lumber and you turned that into a desk. So the Mishnah said you were konit with shinui, even if there's no yiyush and shinui rishus. We talked about that before. We'll mention that again. If there's yiyush, if the owner gave up and you've changed possession, you've given it to somebody else who've changed possession, possibly even an heir. If an heir got it, that might also be considered change of possession. Then you're konit that way. But here, when it comes to shinui masa, if you change the nature of the item, as we'll see, if it's something certainly that cannot be reverted back to its original form. For example, let's say you stole some raw wood and you shaved it down and you fashioned it into a desk or a club or something or a chair. You can't take it back to its original state because it's already been changed. Now, we talked about that yesterday. If it's smooth stone, if it's like plain good, lumber that you just nail together some item, a chair or a stool or something, and you could take it apart again, that's not necessarily shinui masa. But if you really change shinui masa, the Mishnah said that the robber acquires it. So what does he have to? He has to return. He has to return the value of the original wood that he stole, but he gets to keep the stool because it's shinui masa. Then the Gemara said there's another opinion that shinui b'mkoma omei, even if he made a change, it doesn't. The robber does not acquire it. He's got to give it back. Do you really find that he always has to give it back? So we said no. There's cases where he doesn't actually have to give it back, even though he didn't acquire it, simply because we want to make a special reform so that to help Bali Tshuva return do well. In other words, technically, according to these other shittas who argue with this concept of shinui masa, shinui b'mkoma omei, even if you changed it, it still belongs to the original owner. However, in order to encourage you to do tshuva, we'll allow you to keep it and just pay for the value of what you stole. That's another opinion. But we had this idea that shinui b'mkoma omei, not like the Mishnah. The basic idea in the Mishnah and the Psak is that shinui masa, if you change the item, you get to keep it. That's the rule shinui masa. However, we had several shittas that said maybe shinui masa does not give you possession of it. You have to still return it. So who are those shittas? So Abaye said that there's 5 rabbis. Abaye said Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, Rav Shammai, Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, Rav Shimon Elazar, Rav Shmuel. They all hold that shinui b'mkoma omei, not like our Mishnah, or they'll interpret the Mishnah differently, but not like that we've been saying that shinui masa is kona. They hold it otherwise. And the Gemara, yesterday's Gemara until this point, discussed 2 of them. Now we're going to discuss the other 3. Rav Elazar ben Yaakov Mahi, about the 8th line down on the page. Rav Elazar ben Yaakov Mahi, the time Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, you stole a measure of wheat. Tachni, you ground it. Losha, you kneaded it. Uffa, you baked it. Bifish menachala, and you were mafresh chala. After you stole it, you were so makbid that you're going to be mafresh chala. Case and baruch, you make a bracha. Ain't a baruch, that's not a bracha. Eliminates. That's contempt for God. Valzanemer, botsea berach, the robber who makes a bracha, niyetz Hashem, he's showing contempt for God. Like, oh, that's great, So, but what do you see over here? He obviously made a change. He stole wheat, and he turned that into bread, into dough, whatever. That's certainly a change that doesn't go back. And yet he says that what? That he says, it's his, he has to make a bracha on it. You don't say it's the original owner's. So what do you, I'm sorry. You say over here, Bezmak says, Haresha goes, he made all these changes. He doesn't acquire it. He doesn't acquire it because it still belongs to the original owner. That's not a bracha. He's a robber. It's not his. You don't say it's his and he just has to return the wheat. You say that it really still belongs to the owner. And then he's a robber. And therefore he interprets this out of Rav Elazar. And again, we'll see this is not such a solid, none of these are solid proofs. But Abaye's point is that all these 5 rabbis hold that shinui b'mkoma omei. Even if you did shinui masa, he says no, it still belongs to the owner. So he's a robber. How can he make a bracha now on something like this? So again, Abaye is maintaining that Rav Elazar holds that shinui b'mkoma omei, that the shinui does not make the robber acquire it. If he acquired it, it's his. Okay. Now you might say, what about mitzvah baba ve'era? That's the counter argument we'll see in a few minutes. But at this point, Abai is saying all these rabbis hold that Shini b'm kama omed. Rav Shimon Elazar Mai, the Tanya Klal said, Rav Shimon Elazar, Kol shvach sheshbiach Gazlan. Gazlan stole something and he improved it. If he improved it, he has the upper hand. Ratzon no toshvach. If he wants, he could take the improvement, the improved aspect of it, if it's an animal or whatever, what he did to it, or wood or whatever he did. If he wants to keep it, he can keep it. If he wants, he could tell the owner when he returns it, just keep it. Now, Micah, what do you mean by that? If he improved it, what means that's certainly a good thing. Right? What's the point of that? He has the upper hand. If he wants, he can keep it. If he wants, he can give it back. If he improved it, no toshvach, he can keep the shvach. If he ruined it, he deteriorated, he made it worth less, then he can give it back to him. Why does Shinim come home? Because so what if I made a change? What if I ruined it? So what? It's yours. I didn't acquire it by any shinui. So if that's the case, even if he improved it also, he should have to give it back the way it is, because again, the change does not give the robber ownership. No, that's because of the reform to encourage Bali Tshuva to return it. In other words, you say, if I improved it, as we'll see, there was a takana for Bali Tshuva. If you're going to tell them to return everything, they're not going to do tshuva. So you say, you know what, you can keep the extra part, and because of that, but basically it still belongs to the owner, to the original owner. So what do you see that Shinibam Kama? That's the fourth one. Bishmal Maiwas or Bishmal, that he also holds that way. Shim Kama. The tiny mitzvahs pay up. What's the mitzvah of pay? You give the corner of your field or your karam lahafish menakama. You have to separate it first from the standing corn, the standing wheat. Kama, that's the name. Heard? Kama. The name. He has a new grandchild by that name, right? Kama, stand right. You see, right in today's stuff, you can call them later and tell them. You hear their name about. This is Kama. Kama. If they didn't separate from there, right? He continued processing it. He didn't give the pair. He gets separated from the sheaves after they've been cut down and they're laying in the field. If he wasn't mafresh pay from there, mafresh menakri from the pile after he piled it all together. Before it was smoothed out. Mircha, once he smoothed out the pile, then it's considered the work has been done, and he has to give meiser. Then ma'aser v'nosanlo. He has to give meiser and give it to the parent. Shmuel says no. Af mafresh mena isa. Even if you turned it into dough, you still have to v'nosanlo. Why? Because shinibim kamomed. Even though you changed it, you cut it down, you baked it, you did everything, you turned it into bread, you still have to return it because it still belongs to the original owner. So all these five rabbis, according to Abaye, hold that Shinim come up, that Shinim Masa does not change the ownership. It still belongs to the original owner. Amalei Papa Abaye. So Papa argued with Abaye. He said, Ichbul Kohani Torah Lashminik Beishamai. I understand. That's Beishamai Shita that Shinim come ome. You go to such a tircha to say all these rabbis go like Beishamai. We know in general we hold like Beis Hillel. What are you trying to prove over here, going to such efforts to show that everybody holds like Beishamai? This is what I mean to say. I mean to say there's no machlokas about it. Not only Beishamai, but other shittas hold too. That Shinim Kama Omei. That's what Abaye was saying. Rava. So Abaye and Rava, who were colleagues and always disputed things, Rava says, no. Mimai, how do you know, all these five rabbis, how do you know that they hold Shinim Kama Omei? Why don't we go with the original idea like we said in our Mishnah yesterday, that it goes like some Vasakalim, if you steal wood and you turn them into vessels, or you stole wool and you turn it into clothes, you pay Kishas Exela. Why? Because you acquired it. The Shini Masa acquired it. These five rabbis could also hold that. And he's going to go through each of the five now to prove, or at least to disprove Abaye's point. Rav Shimon who said, Shimon was talking about the case where the rule is that Reishis Hagez, you have to take a certain amount of the fleece of your animals, right? And that's how you have to give to the Kohen. So there's a certain amount you have to give. Let's say you cut off from the 5 animals here. It's usually 5 animals. They produce enough fleece from which you give Reish Sagez. Let's say he took from the first animal, and then he dyed the wool before he gave it to the Kohen. He dyed the wool. Then that's a shini masa. Presumably it's a shini that doesn't go back. So shini masa, now he owns it. He acquired it. It doesn't go to the Kohen. Rav Shimon Yehuda said. Rav Shimon Yehuda said that no, even though you dyed it, Shimon said it still adds up together because the shini didn't do anything, even though you dyed it. So that's what Rav Shimon Yehuda, that was what Abaye said. That's the case. Rav Shimon Yehuda is one of these five. The first of these five hold that even though you do the Shinui Maisa, that does not give ownership to the person who did it, to the robber or whatever, to the person who did the Shinui. Says no. Who says when it comes to dying? Because there it's different because it's not a permanent shinui. You could remove the dye with the proper soap or some other chemical. So that's not a proper shinui. Shinui means when that a shinui that cannot be reverted. Like you took raw wood, you shaved it, and you formed it and fashioned it and put holes in it, etc. And you can't go back to its original state. So maybe there Rav Shimon Yehuda says what that shinui does not change because it's not a permanent shinui. You could just remove it with soap. What was the case of Beis Shammai? Beis Shammai said that if a person, let's say, gave, Esnan Zona, Mechir Kelev, let's say a man paid for a prostitute with a lamb, gave her a lamb. Can't bring that as a carbon, right? Lo Savi Esnan Zona, Mechir Kelev, Beis Shammai, Lo Svash Lo Gdi B'Chalavimo, right? That's the Pasuk Michael. So you can't. Now, let's say he gave the prostitute some wheat, right? Give her wheat, and she turned it into flour and bread or whatever. What about then? Can you do it? So can you use that as a carbon, as a mincha offering, a flour offering? Let's say she turned it into flour or oil. You gave her olives and turned it into oil. What do you say there? So if Beis Shammai says you can't bring it as a carbon, Beis Hillel says you could because it's not the same thing anymore. Okay. And we assume that Beis Shammai's reasoning is that the change does not change doesn't do anything. The fact that there's a physical change, it doesn't take away from the fact that it's usher. And we assumed over here that what's Beis Shammai's reasoning because it's gam shnei, okay, even though you changed it, it's still considered like the original item. But again, how do you prove from that Beis Shammai that shini b'm kamamei? I'd come Beis Shammai hasan ella ligboa mishum demis because it's despicable. It's revolting to give something like that as a carbon, not because the truth is shinui masa would. If a robber stole wheat and turned it into flour, or he stole olives and turned it into olive oil, maybe he would acquire it then. It's his, and all he has to return is the value of the thing that he stole. But in here, when it comes to the base of Mikdash, it's repulsive to give something that was given to a prostitute, even though it was changed from wheat into flour or olives into olive oil. It's still repulsive as a carbon. So that's why Beis Shammai says of it. Maybe he also says that shinui masa is effective. Rav Yaakov, the one we started with today. Rav Yaakov the case of a person who stole wheat and he processed it, and then it's mafresh challah. How can he make a bracha? Right? It's mashma. It still belongs to the original owner. No, the truth is maybe he did acquire it. You stole wheat and you turned it into bread, right? You processed it, you ground it, you kneaded it, you ground it into bread. Maybe he does own it now. What's the problem? The problem is not that he's making a bracha on something that's not his. It's just because it's a mitzvah of Baba Veira. He's doing a mitzvah. He's being mafresh challah now, making a bracha on something that he acquired by a Veira, which is at least an Isra Drabanan. Mitzvah of Baba Veira, lulav agazel, in Masechta Sukkos. Badkan lo kamer Rav Shimon Elazar hasam ela b'akosha. And where did Rav Shimon Elazar say that? Elazar said that Elazar Yaakov was the case. The next one where he said if a gazlan steals something and improves it, he has the option. He can either keep the improvement, or if he wants, if it got worse, he can give it back. Give it back. Why? Because shinei ma'aseh l'chor doesn't help. He says no. Maybe Rav Shimon Elazar was not saying about chasha dehadar. Maybe he's only talking about a weakening or a deterioration of the item that can be reverted. In other words, it can be, let's say he stole an animal and the animal was 100 pounds and now it's down to 75 pounds because he caused it to deteriorate. Okay, you could feed it and fatten it up again and go back. So it's not a permanent change. That's what Shimon Elazar says, that you can give back a kasha. But why do you give it back? Meaning that you don't acquire it by the change that you did to it, because it's not a permanent change. But again, Badi might know that a permanent change, Shini Masa would, pardon?
You made it look worse, and you returned it. Don't you have to be paid the difference between
No, right. So we're saying, we're saying like this, it depends. If you owe that Shini Masa is acquired, so yeah, you might have to pay the difference, but the question is, does he get to keep the item or not? Is it his or not? So he said, we're saying that Shini Masa would give him acquisition, but over here, Shini Masa not. If he deteriorated, he ruined it, he'd have to pay the difference. That's right. And if he improved it and he wants to keep the improvement, he can keep the improvement, but he's got to return what he stole. was worth $100 when he stole it, he's got to return $100. That for sure he has to do. Right? Because it can go back. He's only talking about where he deteriorated, but it can be reverted. It can come back. And there he says you can give it back the way it is. He doesn't have to acquire it by the change that he made, because it's not a permanent change. But if it would be a permanent change, maybe it would also that Shini Masa acquires it. Rabbi Shmuel said that a mitzvah's pay, you have to be mafresh it from the standing wheat. If you didn't do it from that, you mafresh it from the sheaves. If not, you did it from the pile. And once you even that out, it's chayv and meiser, you have to be maser and give it to him, because all these matanos anim are potter from meiser. If they give it to him as that, but once you're chayv, there's chayv and meiser because you've smoothed out the pile, you have to give meiser before you give it to them. Otherwise, the ani would have to give meiser. So I'd come and you pay him. Why does he say over there that you're chayiv anyway? Not because the change is not effective. Shinemaisa would be, but over there there's a special pasuk that says twice tazav, and there's one parshas I think in Vayikra, one's in Dvarim. Rashi brings down the psukim that it says an extra tazav. It doesn't say it by maser. By maser it doesn't say extra tazav, but by the matanos aniyim, the leket shikapeya, the parent olos, when it comes to kerem, all those things says an extra tazav. So it says you have to give it to them, meaning even though you've really acquired it. But the special, you really acquired it. But special pasuk says, even though you've done this, you still have to give it to them. So maybe learn from there that just like over there, you have to give it even though you made a change. All over that could be the same case. And this same idea that we just said that Rava answered Rav Shimon Elazar, that Rabbi Shmuel rather is talking about Peah, where it says an extra tazo. And maybe that's his reason, not because Shinui is not Kona. Again, Abai wanted to say that in all these five rabbis' ideas, they hold that Shini is not Kona. Shini Masa doesn't work. But here he's saying, no, maybe Shini Masa does work. These are just special psukim, special cases. My time, what's Rav Shmuel's reasoning? Why he says that you can give it even after you process it, you still have to give the Matanas Aniyim. Is it because he holds that the Shini that you did does not acquire it to you? You have, even though you made a change, it still hasn't taken away your responsibility because you didn't acquire it. It still belongs to the aniyim. Is that the reason? Normally he holds shinikana like we learned in our Mishnah. But over here it's because it says an extra tazav, even though you acquire, but the pasuk says you got to give it back anyway. If you say that Bishmal's reasoning is because Shini Enikona, like Abai wanted to say, Rava saying, how do you know? But Abai wanted to say that. So Tazi would say because of Rahman. So why did it say extra Tazo? The Rabbanan who certainly old. In other words, all these five rabbis, Beshamai and these other guys, maybe they would say Shini Enikona, maybe according to Abai, but everybody agrees with the Mishnah, and that most of the rabbis hold that Shini is Kona, Shini Mais is Kona. So why would, according to Rabbanan, why the extra Tazo? If you say according to Rabbi Shmuel that what? That Shinui is Kona, but over here it's extra Tazo for that, fine. But if you hold that Rabbi Shmuel really holds like Abai wanted to say that Shinui is not Kona, so why is extra Tazo there? And according to Rabbanan, who certainly hold that what? That Shinui is Kona, right? That Shinui is Kona. So what's the, according to Rabbanan, Tazo say, what do you need the Tazo for? Again, time Rabbi Shmuel Mishum Diksav Shinui Kona. So Tazo said because of Rabbanan. When he says Rabbanan, who is the Rabbanan over here? Rabbanan Tazo said because of Rabbanan, meaning according to Rabbanan, maybe means the other rabbis who also say, again, Rabbi Shmuel argued with the rabbis. If you look at Rabbi Shmuel, what did Rabbi Shmuel say? When Abaye brought him down, Rabbi Shmuel Mahi, above, Rabbi Shmuel says, meaning the Rabbanan, not mean the other rabbis like Mishra, me. The mitzvahs pay etc. You can meiser. So there, Rabbi Shmuel says you could even mafresh from the Isa. They have the dough because that's, even though it's certainly not retractable anymore once it's in the dough stage, and you could still do it. So Rabbi Shmuel either holds Shini and a Kona, or he holds Shini's Kona, but Tazav Yisera. But the Rabbanan who say over here that once it's in the dough form, you don't give it anymore to them. So what do they do with the extra tazo? What do the Rabbanan means? The Rabbanan who argue with Bishmal, and they say that as long as it's still out in the field, in the sheaf estates or in the pile, you can give it to them. Once it's smoothed out, you can meiser and give it. But but not from the dough, not once it's turned into dough, because that shini certainly is an acquisition, and you're not chayiv anymore to give them out. It's not the there's no chiv matanas anim at that point. So according to Rabbanan, what do they do with the extra tazo? Because Rachman Alamli, we boil the karatanya for this brisa, famous brisa, mafkir kamo. Let's say you're trying to avoid giving matanas to the aniyim. So you mafkir your whole karam, your whole vineyard, you're mafkir. If it's hefker is spotted from matanas aniyim. Vishkambok, and you get up in the morning, ubatzra, and then you harvested it. In other words, you try to get around the problem by being mafkir it and then acquiring it from hefker. You're still chayiv a pair of those, you're still chayiv on the things that fell down, whether it's individual grapes or clusters or what was forgotten. Ubepeya, upatam and amaiser. Right? So what does that tell you? That extra tazo to teach me that even if you made it hefker and you think you're getting around the problem and you don't have to give it, you're still chayiv. Why? Because it says the extra tazo by these matanas aniyim. Doesn't say it by meiser, but it says it by other matanas aniyim that you are chayiv. So that's what he does with extra tazo. So we have this machlokus between Abaye and Rava, whether these other rabbis hold that shini b'mkoma omed, that shini masa does not affect a change of ownership or not. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, halach b'Shimon Elazar. Yos halach like Shimon Elazar. Now, which one was Shimon Elazar again? Shimon Elazar says that any improvement that you do, that the Gazlan does, he has a choice. He can either keep the improvement, or if he wants, he can. If he wants, he can give it back. And what do you mean give it back? Why would he want to give back the improvement? Meaning give it back when he deteriorated. The halach of Shimon Elazar, meaning that he can give it back, and Shinu does not acquire it. Shinu does not acquire it. Again, if he caused a loss, he'd have to maybe pay for the loss for the difference, but he can give it back in that state, meaning that the Shinu that he made is not acquired. So he says Allah like Shimon Elazar says more Miyam Shmuel Hachim. This is reviewed of Shmuel says Allah like Shimon Elazar, who apparently says that Shinu is not Kona. Did Shmuel really say from Shmuel ain't Shama lo lagana v'lagas on Nazakim? Shama means you make an assessment. By Nazakim we had before. Remember, if my animal kills your animal and your animal's dead now, so you have to deal with the carcass, but we make an assessment, how much is it worth, and I have to pay the difference. That's only by damages, but not for a ganaf and a gazlan. A ganaf and a gazlan, if they burgled something, you stole something, and it deteriorated, you don't start making an assessment and pay the difference. Rather, the person who stole it has to make good and give him a new animal or a new whatever it was that he stole. You don't make an assessment of the deterioration. You pay the whole thing. So what do you see over here? When it comes to Ganaf and Gazlan, right? Shmuel says, "Ain't Sham lo Ganaf lo Gazlan el Nazakin." Why? Why? Because he owes that Shinu. He does acquire it. Once he stole it and something changed in it, he gets to keep it. So you don't make an assessment. Rather, he has to. He stole an item worth $100. He's got to pay back $100, but he gets to keep it. We don't make an assessment and say pay the difference and et cetera, et cetera. He's got to pay. He's got to pay like the original thing that he stole. Rashi says ain't shaman about 10, 12 lines from the bottom of the page. Ain't shaman paragrishin gabi balam the top of the veil. Amr Shmuel and a zakar who the shaman is on the veil. When is it most fully a mazik at shamash miska abel ganav gazan should not the behema or mesa. Stolen animal and it died, or kickshaw, or he deteriorated it, he ruined its value. Ain't shamaness on avela. Ella shalahemte, they keep it. He acquired it by making the change. So what do you see over here? How could Shmuel say the loch is like Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who says what? That Shinu is not Kona, because that's what he says, that even if it deteriorated, you can just give it back to him. You can give it back to him. You didn't acquire it. Here he says that Shinui does change acquisition. Bishlam al-Rav, something about Bishlam al-Rav, who answered Abaya, when Shimon Elazar say what, you can just give it back if it got ruined. Also by Kasha by a Kasha that went back, that can be reverted, that you can improve whatever you deteriorated can be improved. Like an animal that went down in value, you can feed it and make it worth more. Okay, so Shimon Elazar really does not hold that Shini is not Kona. Shini is Kona. This is not a proper Shini. So Lokasha, it's not a Kasha. Kikom Shimon Elazar, the Shini Kom. When did he say like Shimon Elazar that the change is not effective? If it can revert back to its original state, then it's not a proper Shinu. It's not a permanent change. Kikom Shmuel, when Shmuel said Hasam Ein Sham Lo Lagan V'Gasan El Nazakin Bakashal, there he's talking about if it's a change that cannot be reinstated. For example, if the animal died, you stole an animal and it died, you can't do Tchias HaMesim, right? You can't put it back to its original state. So there you acquire it. but if it could be reverted, fine. So according to Ravi, made that difference El Abaya, but Abai didn't make that difference. Abai said Shimon Lazar holds in all cases Shinibim come home and El Abai the Amr Kikam Shimon Lazar by Klasha Delorder. He's talking about even a Klasha that does not go back, even if you made a permanent change, it still belongs to the original owner. Michael Mamer. How are you going to resolve this difference between Shmuel seems to say like Shimon Lazar that Shinu become home, and on the other hand he says that Shinu is Kona. So Abai Mastaf, this is how Abai will learn. Amr of Shmuel, not that the halacha is like of Shimon Lazar, but rather Amru halacha of Shimon. Others say, some rabbis say, yes, there's some rabbis who say the halacha is like Shimon Lazar, but lay lo sphere lay. It's as if he said, not the halacha is like of Shimon Lazar, but rather the halacha is not like of Shimon Lazar. That's how Abai will learn that. What Shmuel said was the halacha is not like of Shimon Lazar. Shimon Lazar, according to Abai, holds Shinibim come home that the Shinui is not effective. Even if it's a permanent change, it's not effective. But Shmuel doesn't paskin that way. Shmuel goes like a regular psak that Shinui, that a Shinui masa is effective and changes the ownership. Amar Chia Barabba, Amar Yochanan. Now Rav Chia Barabba says something that sounds like the halacha is like Shinui is not kona. Amar Yochanan, Bar Torah, Mina Torah, Zela, and Shtanis, Chozeres, Beinel. That even though something you stole, you made a permanent change. Apparently, it still can give it back the way it is right now. Meaning that the permanent change does not affect a change in ownership. Rashi says in the third line, that's what Rav Chia Barabba says in the name of Yochanan. You return the item no matter what, even whatever you change. You stole wood and you turned it into a desk or a table or something, it still belongs to the original owner. So he's apparently not going on Mishnah. I am Torah Mishnah Seinu. What about our Mishnah? The Mishnah on yesterday's daf that started off the parak said, if you steal wood and you turned it into vessels, right? You pay the wood. You pay the value of the wood. I stole wood worth $100. I turned it into a desk worth $500. I just have to pay the $100 and I keep the desk. What about the Mishnah? How do you explain the Mishnah? If you say that Shinui does not make effective a change, he'll say Mishum Takanas Shavim. There's a special account, like we said before, in order to encourage people to do tshuva. Technically, it's owned by the original owner, and your change is not effective. But in order to do tshuva, to encourage people to do tshuva, we say, if I have to give back the desk, I put in a lot of effort into the desk. I hired a carpenter, and I spent money and effort and all that. If I have to give back the desk, I'm not going to do tshuva. So you say, keep it and just return the money. A special takana to help people do tshuva. Says the Gemara, Mir Rabbi Yochanan. Did Rabbi Yochanan really say that? That what Shini would come home made? Rabbi Yochanan on Stam Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan always holds that is like a Stam Mishnah, like an authorless Mishnah, anonymous Mishnah. It's not lo hispiklit no lo. Like we said yesterday with the Reishis Agez. If you didn't give it to the Kohen until you dyed it, you're potter because you didn't have enough at one time of wool, of fleece that you have to give enough to make you chayiv in Reishis Agez. Because every time you cut it off from one animal, you dyed it immediately, which means that the change that you made was effective in changing ownership, but it's not the same. There's no chiyuv on this item anymore to give it to the Kohen. One of the rabbis whose name was Rabbi Yaakov, he answered it. I heard directly from Yochanan, it's a pshat. Our Mishnah is speaking about where you stole smoothed out, sanded wood. It wasn't wood that cannot be reverted. You stole standard vasi and came top of the Our Mishnah is speaking about where it's a shinui which can go back to its original state, and that's why it goes late in vasim kalim like zela, right? Why? You're not a permanent state. Yes, you can keep it. Why do you have to say that? Why don't you give back the original item? The truth is, if it's a permanent change you acquire it. Rashi says, that's speaking about that. In the case of the wool, there's no takana sham. Not talking about something you stole. You're talking about a chiyuv reishis hagez. So from reishis hagez, you see over there that the change is permanently effective. There's no takana sham there. The answer is masnisin. Next mission, next Rashi, 4 lines into the narrow lines of Rashi. Masnisin look at Rabbi Yochanan because like mishupim. Mishum hachikam Rabbi Yochanan at the time mishum takanas shavim. Because we're speaking about a case where you didn't really make a permanent change. You stole sanded down wood, which you formed into a chair or a desk or something, and you can take it apart. The shinui kihai lavshi is not a shinui. Therefore, what he's saying really is this. When he says over here, now, we're not talking about a permanent change. We're talking about a change like you took wood that could go back to its original state. You took sanded down wood, ready just to assemble, and now you could disassemble it. Okay, like an IKEA, right? You bought it from IKEA, and you assembled it. And now we say you only have to pay back the original amount. Why? Why don't you give back the original item if you didn't make a permanent change? Because it's Hakanas HaShavim to encourage people to do tshuva. However, if there was a permanent change, then Rabbi Yochanan would also be moda that permanent change affects a change in ownership. That's why it's a little bit difficult to understand. The Gemara's answer is not so clear. You should say, Lolam Rabbi Yochanan holds that Shini Maisa is Kona. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan, Dvar Tog Zel Shas Chaz Beinah, Shnem Reishis Gesher Gazel. What about our Mishnah? Mishnah is taking us Shavim. But Rabbi Yochanan says in another aspect, by the case of the wool, that you're potter from paying because it affected a change of ownership. It doesn't belong to the coin anymore once you made a permanent change. And he doesn't hold that answer that the dye could be retracted by soap or whatever. He holds that's a permanent change. So one of the rabbis said, no, I heard from Rabbi Yochanan that our Mishnah is speaking about, why does he say our Mishnah has to come on to the fact of Tanas HaShavim? Because they were speaking about where you stole wood that could be retracted, could go back to its original state. If you stole wood that can go back to its original state, technically you should give back the desk, except for the Tanas HaShavim, because you didn't make a permanent change. With Tanas HaShavim, we say keep the desk and pay back the money. But if it wouldn't be for Tanas HaShavim, you should give back the desk. Why? Because it's not a permanent change. You didn't really change wood. If you stole rough wood and you sanded it down, you did something to it that you couldn't go back to its original state, then that would be an acquisition according to Rav Yochanan as well, because Rav Yochanan held by Tzavo Potter. Why? Because that affected a change. So Shina Chazla Briaso, if it's a Shina that can go back to its original state, that's not a Shinoi, and you should give it back. Oh, except for Takanas HaShavim. Now we're going to talk a little about Takanas HaShavim. Tana Rabbanim. Tana Rabbanim. Now, this gets into a lot of areas. We're supposed to discuss the several aspects of it, but before this is going to encourage you to ask a lot of questions. But let's at least finish the Gemara, then you'll see if some of the questions will be answered. Tana Rabbanim. Hagazlanim Lave Beribis. Now, we're not talking about somebody who stole something as a one-shot deal. Our Mishnah could be talking about you stole something as a one-shot thing. You stole some wood, you needed the wood, you needed a desk, you needed a chair, and you done it. So, okay. So technically, if you did it into a chair, you don't have to return the chair. You either Takanas HaShavim, or if you learn that our Mishnah speaking where you made a permanent change, you get to keep it. Fine. But let's say a person is a professional gaz. Hagazlanum Lavim Ribis. This is what their profession is. They stole from many people. Either they stole, there's Gazlan directly stolen, or they lend out money for usury, for ribbit. Shech zero, if they returned it, a makal man. You don't accept the return. They're trying to do tshuva, you don't accept it from them. This is the line of it's Gemara, but see also, the chacham are not happy with a person like that. Rashi says, Ein ruach chachma b'chasidus b'kirbo. A person is not a pious person. He doesn't have a spirit of wisdom and chasidus and piety in a person like that, because you're not encouraging him to do tshuva. So he says over here, listen to this. If a guy wants to do tshuva and return the money that he stole and the gazlanin and the malav meribis, you don't accept it from them. Now, this is a strange thing. You don't accept it from the guy who wants to return what he stole. What does that mean? So before we ask, we'll get the answer to these questions. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. They may Rabbi Nishis Mishazu. This Mishnah was said only in time of Rabbi. Tosa says that it's not made for earlier or later generations. It was only made at that point. Rabbi did it as a one-shot, as a temporary enactment. Why? The time there was a story, there was a man, man who always stole everything. He was a gazlan. You want to do tshuva? His wife said, Reika, idiot. Imata osa tshuva. Empty-headed one. If you do tshuva, I feel you won't even have a belt. You won't have a shirt. You won't have anything. Everything you have is stolen. You're a professional gazlan. The Nimna of Lasa Tshuva, he didn't do tshuva because he realized still have nothing left. But at that time, Amru, they said, zero, they want to do tshuva, you don't accept from them. Even though technically they have stolen goods, you shouldn't accept it from them. Now, we've used this idea of Takanas HaShavim in cases where technically they have to return the whole item because there's no change in it, right? Even if you hold that Shinui is Kona, it's only a permanent change. But here we said no, and Takanas HaShavim, they can keep it. But here he says, even if they want to return it, you don't accept from them. They say, How can you say that? They don't return. The father died and left over some money. He left over usury money. He had a special account. So he had a regular account for the Karen and a special account for the usury. Didn't have to pay tax on that. So he had a special account for the usury. And he left them over. Here's the statement. Here's all the usury that we collected, all the interest. Even though they know it's usury, they know it's interest money. They don't have to return it. They don't have to. The children don't have to. The father. So how can you say that they made it? You don't return. You don't accept the usury from them. It's mashma. The kids don't have to, but the father does. No, but the father's also not chayiv to return it again because we want to encourage them to do tshuva. If you tell them they have to return everything, they won't do tshuva. At least they won't. They won't do tshuva. Maybe they'll keep on stealing. Right? The Dapim also doesn't have to return it. But the reason we're talking about the children is we should the safe of that Mishnah says over there. Part of a talis. Let's say the father left them over not money, not usury. You don't see, but he left them over a specific item like a cow or a garment, a talis, or anything specific. Then they should return that back. They cover avim because it looks like you have that's my cow. Your father stole it and he died. That's my cow over there. It's not. It's very obvious. So because of the honor of the father, they should return those items. So because they were talking about the kids don't ration do. So the ration we're talking about money. Also, we say the kids don't have to return it. But the truth is the father doesn't return it either with this takana. So they covered avim chaim lahachzer. Why should they have to return it? Because of the covet of their father. The father was a known ganav. He has covet. Ikri kind of enosi bam chalosar. Pasuk says you shouldn't curse the prince in your nation. When he's a proper prince, when he does follows the Torah. But if he didn't follow the Torah, he's a ganav. Why are you worried about his honor? Your father stole this para. You got to, because of his honor, you got to return it. Prince says elsewhere, B'shas tshuva. Speaking of the father did tshuva, Chanam B'shas tshuva. He also tshuva, my boy. If the father did tshuva, why does he still have the cow? Right? He should have returned it. So his he died before he got a chance. The father did tshuva. Many people do tshuva on their deathbed. He didn't get a chance. He meant to do tshuva, and he didn't get a chance to return it until he died. So then you say if he did tshuva, then the kids should return those specific items because it doesn't look good. He was a tzaddik when he died, so at least return it so you shouldn't be embarrassed. But if it's money, you don't have to return it because to encourage the people to do tshuva. Tashma, Tosa points out also this idea that anybody could say they did tshuva, right? We're not talking about, anybody could say that. Right? So the point is that we're not saying this as a general rule. We're talking about in general, if you have my Gazlan and a known ganaf or a known usurer, so there we want to encourage them to do, if we encourage them to do tshuva, we say these rules, but you don't say every time that a person, you assume he did tshuva. You can't assume that. Tashma, Gazlan again. So this idea that you say that you shouldn't accept returned items from the Gazlan Mamlav Ribis in order to encourage them to do tshuva, doesn't that seem to be at odds with these brises that we brought? So he said, no. You don't have to, only if it's stuff from assuming that he did tshuva. Tashma, Gazlan Malav Meribas, Afisha Gavu, even though they've collected already, Machzirin, they have to give it back. Now, Gazlan and Ma'ashigavu, what do you mean, Gazlan and Ma'ashigavu? If they're Gazlan, what do you mean they collected? They're not collecting, they're Gazlan. If they stole, they stole. If they didn't steal, they didn't steal. Elaim HaGazlan, robbers, who are they? Ma'aniu Malav Meribas. Malav Meribas are also robbers because they're doing it openly. You signed on a dotted line that you're going to pay 10% interest. So you're a Goslin, you're a Malavros, you're kind of a Goslin. Afisha Gavu, even though they've collected it, certainly if they didn't collect it yet, you should tear up the document, right? It's a bad document, a document that has ribis written into it. But even if they collected it or they got to give it back. So what do you see? How can you say that you don't accept from them? Here it says they return the money. Amri Machzir and they have to return it, but you shouldn't accept it from them. They have an obligation to try to return it, but you shouldn't accept from them. So why are they trying to do tshuva? Why are they returning it if you're not going to accept it? They should make an effort to return it, and then you should be nice and say, I can't accept it from you. That was what the kana was. Another proof like that, Arom Bagabon, shepherds who are known to be Gazlanim because they shepherd their animals in other people's fields by Gabon, tax collectors who take too much tax, more than the normal amount. Not talking about where there's fixed rules and they do whatever they want. Muhsin or usually Muhsin or customs collectors who take whatever they want. Shabbos and Kosher, it's hard for them to do tshuva because they steal from so many people. Umachzir l'makir, but pardon?
They steal, some professionals, gun steals from you, you write it up. Because you're not supposed to accept the returning.
That's correct. That's correct. That's what we're saying at this point. Now, this wasn't for all time. It was only for that generation. But he made that special economy there to encourage people to do tshuva. Correct. Now, if he was a burglar and he was caught basically the kafel, he would have to pay probably by court. But whatever. But here we're saying that gazlana, we're talking about regular robbers. They have to make an effort to return it, but you shouldn't accept them from them. Elamas, why are they returning it? Again, the same thing. He says it's hard for them to do tshuva. And they should return l'makirin to the ones who they recognize. Oh, I know I took this from you. Return it to him. But we see that they do return it. And so you just said before you don't accept from them. They try to return it. They become you don't accept from them. Elam same thing. So why they return it? Plus they should make an effort. If you say that they can return it and they're trying to return it, and accept that you should be nice and you shouldn't accept them, why do you say it's hard for them to do tshuva? They could do tshuva if they try to return it. But Amos Sefer says the ones who you don't recognize, you don't know who you took it from. You should donate, give like public works. You should make public works to return it to the public. You stole from so many people, you should donate public works. What's that? For example, make pits and ditches and caves for water to help the public, do public works for them. But what do you see? That you do return it. You do accept from them. Because it says the ones who you recognize, you should return to them, right? And if you say that you don't accept from them, why do you say tshuvas and kasha? If you say over here that they're trying to return it, but you just don't accept it, so they did tshuva. What's the problem? It says even the ones that you can't return it to because you don't know who you stole from, so do public works. But you could do tshuva. Elo kasha. That was speaking about before they made the takana. You shouldn't accept it. Once you made the takana, you shouldn't accept it. Then you shouldn't accept it from them. That's what we meant before, that the ones that before they made the takana, they have an obligation to return it. It's hard for them to do tshuva because they don't always know who they stole it from. It's hard for them to do tshuva. The ones they recognize, they should return it. The ones they don't recognize, they should do public works. But it's hard for them to do tshuva because they stole from so many people. Okay, so that's speaking about, what are we saying? It said you should do public works. So it's much we do accept it. That was before the takana. This is speaking about after takana. Ashram Rav Nachman said, V'she'en zel kayemes. If the gzeila is not here anymore, that we say over here, that what you don't accept from them, that's only when the item that they stole is not here anymore. It's not extant. Both means we have to kind of lokasha. Kan b'gzeil kamas kam shenik zelak. It's very simple. Where we say that you don't accept from them when they're trying to do tshuva, when the item that they stole is not here anymore, you want to accept money from them. So we want to encourage them to do tshuva, so you don't accept it from them. But if the item is here, you do accept it intact. What was the story with the whole thing started with? There was a professional ganav who wanted to do tshuva, and his wife said, if you do tshuva, you won't even have a belt. There was a specific item, and they made it takana. You shouldn't have to return it. Huh?
She probably said, I
want the belt. There's kayamas, and we still made the takana. Smay avne doesn't really mean the belt. It mean the value of the belt. You won't even have the value of a belt. So what do you mean? So with Xela's here, the Rabbanan did not make a takanas hashavim and say, don't accept it back. But Marish, what about the case of a large beam that was built into a house? The Xela kayamas is here. Utanan ala Marish Agazla made a takanas shabbanim, you built it into a house. She'itotam, just pay for him takanas hashavim, because if he has to return the beam, the whole house will come down. He'll lose the whole house. So because of takana for shavim, the rabbi said you return it, even though you don't have to return the beam, just pay the value. Even though it's intact, shiny awesome. The kiva the say to the beer, since you'd lose the whole house. Shabbat Rabbanik Lesser Rabbanan said it's as if it's not here anymore. But normally we say even that the kana, and according to Tosfos, the kana was only for a specific period of time to encourage professional gazlanim. We're not talking about our Mishnah where one guy stole it and he's got to return it as he koned it or not. We're talking about when there was a professional gazlanim at the time of Rebbe when he made that takana. That was the time of Rebbe. We said Rabbi Nishmish Razu with Brisa happened. That idea that the guy wanted to do tshuva, and his wife said, if you do tshuva, we'll have nothing left. And they said, you don't have to do tshuva. We said, don't accept it from them. That's only if the items aren't intact. But if the items are intact, they should return it. Except if it's something like it would be a terrible loss, like the case of the beam. You stole a beam, built it into a house. The whole house was dependent on this beam. And if you to return the beam, you'd lose the whole house. The rabbis also said there, it's as if the item is not here. and just return the value, and you don't have to, and you have to pay for it, but you don't have to return the item itself. All right, so we'll pick it up from here tomorrow, from the two das. Have a good day. Shavua tov.